Patricia Brown stood at the kitchen window of her Cedar Park home, watching the movers load the last of the furniture into their truck. The house, the one she and Robert had built from the ground up 30 years ago, looked hollow now, stripped of the memories they'd created together. But staying wasn't an option. Every corner held Robert's ghost, his favorite armchair by the fireplace, the workshop where he'd spend weekends crafting furniture, the garden they'd planned together. Robert had fought the cancer bravely for 18 months. "Don't you dare give up on me, Patty," he'd whisper during the worst nights. But in the end, his body surrendered even as his spirit remained defiant. After 35 years of marriage, Patricia found herself alone at 58, with nothing but silence as her companion. The realtor had been kind but practical. "The market's good, Mrs. Brown. We should be able to sell quickly." And they had almost too quickly, as if the universe was eager to close this chapter of her life before she was ready. "That's the last box, ma'am," the moving company foreman said, clipboard in hand. "Will you be riding with us to your daughter's place?" Patricia shook her head. "No, I'll drive my own car. Thank you." Rachel had offered her place almost immediately after the funeral. "Stay with us, Mom, just until you figure things out," she'd said, her husband Matthew nodding beside her, though his eyes never quite met Patricia's. The drive to Rachel and Matthew's apartment in East Austin took 40 minutes, each mile putting greater distance between Patricia and the life she'd known. Their building was decent enough, a 3-story complex with small balconies and a modest courtyard. Rachel met her in the parking lot, wrapping her in a tight hug that smelled of the jasmine perfume Patricia had given her last Christmas. "Welcome, Mom," Rachel said, helping with one of the smaller boxes. "Matthew's inside setting up your room." The apartment was modern but compact, 2 bedrooms, an open-concept kitchen and living area, and a small study that Matthew used for his work as a financial analyst. The guest room, now Patricia's room, was at the back of the apartment, hardly bigger than a walk-in closet, but it had a window that overlooked a small grove of trees. "It's not much," Rachel said apologetically, "but it's cozy." "It's perfect, sweetheart," Patricia assured her, though she felt her heart sink at the thought of condensing her life into this small space. Matthew appeared in the doorway, his tall frame nearly touching the top of the jamb. His smile was polite but didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Brown," he said with a nod. "Matthew, thank you for having me," Patricia replied, extending her hand, which he shook briefly. "Rachel's idea," he said, then quickly added, "but of course, we're happy to help during this transition period." Patricia didn't miss the emphasis on transition, or the way his gaze swept over her belongings with barely concealed concern. The first week passed in a blur of unpacking and adjusting. Patricia tried to establish routines that wouldn't disrupt Rachel and Matthew's lives. She woke early, made breakfast for everyone, cleaned up after herself meticulously, and spent most afternoons reading or taking walks around the neighborhood to give the couple space. But by the second week, the cracks began to show. It started with small things, Matthew sighing loudly when Patricia used the kitchen past 7 in the evening, or changing the TV channel mid-show when she was watching. Then came the comments. Quiet at first, but growing bolder. "Did you need to use all the hot water?" he asked one morning, his voice sharp. "The utility bill's going to be interesting this month," he remarked another day, eyeing the lamp Patricia had left on in her room. Rachel witnessed these moments but said nothing, her eyes darting between her husband and mother before finding sudden interest in her phone or a book or the dishes that needed washing. One evening, Patricia overheard them arguing in hushed tones in their bedroom. "She's my mother, Matt," Rachel's voice strained against the thin walls. "And I get that, but we didn't sign up for a permanent house guest," Matthew replied. "We talked about starting a family this year. Remember, how are we supposed to do that with your mom living in what would be the nursery? She just lost Dad. She needs time. We all need things. Rachel, I need space in my own home." Patricia's heart constricted. She had become an intruder in her daughter's life. That night, she lay awake planning how to find work, save for an apartment, become independent again. But the job applications she'd sent to grocery stores, office reception desks, retail shops had all come back with the same polite rejection, We've decided to pursue other candidates who better match our current needs. No one wanted to hire a grieving widow in her late 50s with a 30-year gap in her resume. Still, she tried harder to make herself useful. She deep-cleaned the apartment while they were at work, prepared elaborate dinners, offered to run errands. One afternoon, she baked Matthew's favorite cookies, remembering how Rachel had mentioned he loved peanut butter chocolate chip. "You didn't have to do that," Matthew said when he saw the plate. But he took 2 anyway. "I wanted to," Patricia replied. "It's the least I can do." "The least you could do," he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear as he walked away. "Would be to find your own place." Patricia froze, the sting of his words worse than if he'd slapped her. She looked to Rachel, who stood arranging flowers at the counter, her back deliberately turned to the exchange. That night, Patricia heard them arguing again, louder this time. "She's trying, Matt. Did you have to be so cruel?" "I'm not being cruel and I'm being realistic. It's been almost 3 months. What do you expect her to do? She's applying everywhere, but no one's hiring her." "That's not our problem. Rachel, we have our own lives to think about." "She's my mother, and I'm your husband. Or have you forgotten that?" The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia pulled her pillow over her head, trying to block out the pain that radiated through her chest. Her daughter was being forced to choose, and Patricia already knew which way the scales would tip. The next morning, a heaviness hung in the apartment. Rachel left early for work, barely saying goodbye. Matthew lingered, drinking his coffee at the kitchen island while Patricia washed the breakfast dishes. "Mrs. Brown," he said suddenly, his voice artificially even. "I think we need to have a conversation about expectations and timelines." Patricia dried her hands slowly, steeling herself. "I understand, Matthew. I'm trying my best to find a job and a place of my own. Trying isn't really the point, is it?" His tone was dismissive. "Results are what matter. Rachel and I, we have plans, goals. This arrangement was supposed to be temporary. I know, and I'm grateful for grateful doesn't pay bills or create space." He cut in. "I've been patient, but frankly, I feel like we're being taken advantage of." "That's never been my intention," Patricia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Intentions are nice, but again, it's results that count." He stood up, towering over her. "I think you need to start looking at other options. Senior housing, maybe something subsidized." Patricia felt her face flush with humiliation. "I'm not even 60, Matthew. I don't qualify for senior housing, and I certainly don't need to be spoken to like I'm incompetent." His eyes narrowed. "Then maybe you should prove your competence by not being a burden on your daughter's marriage." The word burden hung in the air between them, heavy and toxic. Patricia turned away, unwilling to let him see the tears that threatened to spill. Later that day, when Rachel returned from work, Patricia tried to broach the subject of finding alternative living arrangements, hoping to diffuse the tension before it exploded further. "I've been thinking," she began as they chopped vegetables for dinner. "Maybe I could look into roommate situations. Split the rent with another woman in my situation." Rachel paused, knife hovering over a bell pepper. "Mom, don't listen to Matthew. He's just stressed about work. His boss is putting pressure on him to take on more clients." "I understand stress, sweetheart, but I also understand when I'm not welcome." "That's not true," Rachel insisted, though her eyes wouldn't meet Patricia's. "It's just an adjustment period." Patricia wanted to believe her, wanted to think that her own daughter wouldn't cast her aside, but the writing was on the wall, clear as day. 3 days later, Patricia prepared Matthew's favorite meal, roasted chicken with garlic potatoes and fresh green beans. It was a peace offering, an attempt to smooth the increasingly rough waters. She'd spent hours in the kitchen, making sure everything was perfect. The table was set, candles lit. Rachel arrived home first, raising an eyebrow at the elaborate spread. "What's all this?" she asked. "Just to thank you," Patricia replied. "For everything you both have done." Rachel's smile was tinged with something guilt-sadness. Patricia couldn't quite place it. Matthew arrived 20 minutes late, loosening his tie as he walked in. He surveyed the table with an unreadable expression. Looks fancy, was all he said before sitting down. Dinner began quietly. Rachel filled the silence with stories from her day at the architectural firm where she worked. Matthew ate methodically, checking his phone between bites. Patricia watched them both, feeling the distance growing by the minute. Halfway through the meal, Matthew set down his fork with deliberate precision. "I think we need to stop pretending," he said suddenly. Rachel's chatter cut off abruptly. "Matt?" she warned, her voice low. "No, Rachel, it's time to be honest." He turned to Patricia. "This isn't working." Patricia's heart began to race. "I'm sorry if dinner isn't to your liking. It's not about dinner," he interrupted. "It's about this situation. How long is this supposed to go on? You're not working. You're not contributing financially. And we're covering all the expenses." Patricia looked to Rachel, desperate for support. Her daughter's eyes were fixed on her plate. "I've been trying to find work," Patricia said quietly. Matthew scoffed. "Trying isn't enough. We've got bills, plans, a future to think about. We didn't sign up to support an extra mouth to feed indefinitely." The phrase "extra mouth to feed" hit Patricia like a physical blow. She was being reduced to a burden, a drain on resources. "Matt, please," Rachel finally spoke, but her voice was weak. "What I'm just saying, what we've both been thinking." He turned to Rachel. "Tell her." Rachel's face crumpled. Maybe it would be best if you found something more stable. For everyone's sake. For everyone's sake." The words echoed in Patricia's mind. Not for her sake, for theirs. For Matthew's comfort. For Rachel's compliance. Patricia looked at her daughter, the little girl she'd nursed through fevers, taught to ride a bike, helped through her first heartbreak, and saw a stranger. A woman who'd chosen the path of least resistance over defending her own mother. In that moment, something shifted inside Patricia. Where there should have been tears, there was a strange, calm clarity. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She simply stood up, pushed her chair in neatly, and walked to her room. She pulled out 2 suitcases, all she had left of her previous life, and began packing methodically. Clothes, toiletries, a few photos, her husband's watch, the pearl earrings Robert had given her on their 30th anniversary. The rest would have to stay behind. When she emerged 20 minutes later, Rachel and Matthew were still at the table, speaking in hushed tones that stopped abruptly when they saw her with the suitcases. "Mom," Rachel's voice wavered. "I understand," Patricia said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Thank you for the time you've given me." "You're leaving now. It's almost 9 o'clock, Rachel said, looking panicked. "I believe I've overstayed my welcome," Patricia replied, her gaze locked with Matthew's, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Mom, we didn't mean tonight. We can talk about this. There's nothing left to talk about. Rachel, you've made your choice." Patricia picked up her suitcases. "I won't burden you any further." She walked to the door, half expecting, hoping that Rachel would stop her, would stand up to Matthew, would choose her mother over the man who had reduced her to an extra mouth. But Rachel remained seated, tears streaming down her face in silence. "I love you, Rachel," Patricia said softly. "I always will." Then she walked out, closing the door behind her with a gentle click. The night air was cool against her face as she stood outside the apartment building, 2 suitcases at her feet. The reality of her situation hit her all at once. She had nowhere to go, very little money, and no one to call for help. Her friends were mostly couples she and Robert had known together, and they'd drifted away during his illness, uncomfortable with the reminder of mortality. She sat down on a bench near the building's entrance, pulled out her phone to call for a taxi, and found it dead. She'd forgotten to charge it that morning. A perfect metaphor, she thought bitterly. She too was running on empty, with no power source in sight. Patricia sat there for nearly an hour, watching cars drive past, lights flicker in windows, lives continuing all around her while hers had come to a standstill. Finally, she picked up her suitcases and began walking toward the main road, hoping to find a hotel or motel within walking distance. 3 blocks later, she spotted the neon sign of the Bluebonnet Inn, a modest motel that had seen better days. The lobby smelled of old carpet and air freshener trying too hard to mask it. "Just you?" asked the clerk, a young man with tired eyes. "Just me," Patricia confirmed, handing over her credit card and praying it wouldn't be declined. The room was small and worn peeling wallpaper, a mattress that sagged in the middle, a television that probably dated back to the 90s, but it was shelter, and for tonight, that had to be enough. Patricia sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing the tears to come. They weren't loud, dramatic sobs, but silent rivers of grief that shook her body. She cried for Robert, for the home they'd built, for the daughter who had chosen silence over defense, and for herself, the woman who had given everything to her family only to find herself discarded when she needed them most. "This is what it feels like," she whispered to the empty room. "To be erased." The next morning, Patricia woke to sunlight filtering through thin curtains and the distant sound of traffic. For a brief, merciful moment, she didn't remember where she was or why. Then reality crashed back, and the weight of it nearly took her breath away. She forced herself to get up, to shower in the cramped bathroom with its lukewarm water and miniature soap bar. One foot in front of the other, she told herself. That's how survival works. Her first order of business was finding a more permanent place to stay. The motel was $65 per night, a rate that would deplete her savings within weeks. After a meager breakfast from the vending machine, she used the motel's computer in the lobby to search for extended stay options and monthly rentals. The results were disheartening. Anything decent was far beyond her budget, and the places she could afford were in neighborhoods where safety was a serious concern. She settled for a weekly rate at the Bluebonnet Inn, buying herself some time to figure out next steps. Her second task was reaching out to Rachel, not to ask for help or to move back. Patricia's pride wouldn't allow that, but simply to let her know she was safe. She drafted a text message, deleted it, rewrote it 3 times before finally sending, "I'm settled safely at the Bluebonnet Inn. I understand your position. I love you always. Mom." No reply came. 3 days later, she tried again. "Just checking in. Hope work is going well. Love, Mom." Silence. By the end of the week, Patricia had applied to 17 jobs cashier positions, receptionist roles, administrative assistant openings. She walked into stores with resumes in hand, smiling through the pitying looks from managers young enough to be her children. She called old contacts from her pre-marriage career in office administration, only to learn most had retired or didn't remember her. The weekend brought rain, and with it, a deeper sense of isolation. Patricia sat by the motel window, watching droplets race down the glass, and wondered how her life had unraveled so completely in such a short time. A knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find an older woman with silver hair cut in a stylish bob, holding an umbrella. "Hello there," the woman said cheerfully. "I'm Martha Jenkins, 3 doors down. Noticed you checked in last week. Thought I'd be neighborly and introduce myself." Patricia was so surprised by the friendly gesture that she just stared for a moment before gathering herself. "I'm Patricia Brown. Would you like to come in?" Martha accepted the invitation, shaking out her umbrella before stepping inside. "Been here 2 months myself," she explained, settling into the room's only chair. "My condo had a fire. Insurance is taking their sweet time. So here I am." There was something immediately comforting about Martha's no-nonsense attitude. Before Patricia knew it, they were sharing life stories over cups of instant coffee made with the room's tiny coffee maker. "Kicked out by your own daughter and that jackass son-in-law." Martha's eyebrows shot up when Patricia explained her situation. "That's cold." "She didn't exactly kick me out." Patricia found herself defending Rachel reflexively. "She just didn't stop it from happening." "Same difference," Martha said with a wave of her hand. "Still leaves you here." "Doesn't it?" Patricia couldn't argue with that logic. "What's your plan?" Martha asked bluntly. "Find a job, save for a place, rebuild," Patricia replied, surprised by the determination in her own voice. Martha nodded approvingly. "Good girl. And in the meantime, you're having dinner with me tonight. I've got a hot plate and make a mean spaghetti." That night, sharing pasta and cheap wine with her new friend. Patricia felt the first small spark of hope since leaving Rachel's apartment. She wasn't alone. She could rebuild. She would survive this. The job hunt continued through the following weeks, each rejection adding another small fracture to Patricia's confidence. She took to walking the neighborhood in the afternoons, partly to save on the motel's air conditioning costs, and partly to escape the cramped room that was beginning to feel like a prison. On one of these walks, she found herself at a small park with a duck pond. She sat on a bench, watching children feed the ducks while their parents looked on. A memory surfaced Rachel at 4 years old, squealing with delight as ducks waddled toward her outstretched hand full of breadcrumbs. Robert laughing beside them, his arm around Patricia's waist. "We did good, Patty," he'd said, watching their daughter. "We made something beautiful." The memory brought fresh pain. Where was that beautiful thing now? Had it been an illusion all along that evening? She tried calling Rachel again, straight to voicemail. Patricia didn't leave a message. What was there to say that hadn't already been met with silence at the 1-month mark of her stay at the Bluebonnet Inn? Patricia was sorting through one of her suitcases, looking for a pair of earrings, when her hand brushed against a small wooden box tucked at the bottom. She pulled it out, recognizing it instantly, Robert's memory box, where he'd kept special mementos from their life together. She hadn't remembered packing it, must have grabbed it instinctively during those numb days after his death. Opening it now felt like opening a time capsule movie ticket stubs from their first date. The hospital bracelet from Rachel's birth, dried flowers from their wedding bouquet, and at the very bottom, a leather-bound book she didn't recognize. Patricia lifted it carefully. The binding was cracked with age. The pages yellowed. Opening to the first page, she saw handwriting she instantly recognized her mother's elegant, flowing script. "My dearest diary," it began. "Today, I saw him again. HJS says he wishes things could be different, that I could be his wife. But his family, his business, his reputation, they all come first. Margaret will never know. She must never know." Patricia's breath caught. Margaret, her mother's formal name for her. What was it her mother thought she should never know? She flipped through more pages, reading entries dated decades ago, before her birth, during her childhood. A picture began to emerge, a love affair between her mother, Eleanor, and a man identified only as HJS, a man who was not Patricia's father, or rather, not the man she'd been raised to believe was her father. "He came again today." Read one entry, "Left money, which I tried to refuse, but with James drinking away his paycheck. I need something to feed Margaret. HJS promised he would make arrangements, that if anything happened to him, Margaret would be taken care of. A trust," he said. His lawyer, Mr. Goldstein, would know what to do. Patricia's hands trembled. Goldstein. The name struck a chord deep in her memory. She recalled overhearing her parents arguing once when she was young, her father shouting, "If you ever contact Goldstein again, I'll take the girl and you'll never see her." She'd been so young, had forgotten the incident until now. But here it was, confirmation that there was more to her history than she'd ever known. Patricia stayed up half the night, reading entry after entry, piecing together a truth that had been hidden from her all her life. By dawn, she had a name: Harold James Sterling, founder of Sterling Energy, one of the largest oil companies in Texas, a married man with a reputation to protect and a secret daughter he'd never publicly claimed, a daughter who now sat in a rundown motel room, holding the key to a truth that could change everything. Patricia barely slept that night, the diary entries swimming through her mind. By morning, she had made a decision she needed to find this Goldstein, to discover if there was any truth to her mother's writings. The motel's lobby computer became her research tool. Leonard Goldstein wasn't a unique name, but when she narrowed her search to estate lawyers in Dallas, the results became more manageable. After several false leads, she found him: Leonard Goldstein, senior partner at Goldstein & Associates, specializing in estate law and trusts. Patricia's hands trembled as she wrote a letter. Email felt too impersonal for something this momentous, and she wanted time to carefully choose her words. She explained who she was, mentioned her mother Eleanor, and asked for a meeting regarding a matter her mother had referenced in her personal writings. "I understand this request may seem unusual," she wrote, "but I believe you may have information about my family history that has been kept from me." She mailed the letter with a mix of hope and trepidation, then tried to put it out of her mind. There was no guarantee Goldstein would remember, or even still be alive. The diary entries were decades old. A week passed with no response. Patricia continued her job search, now with an added urgency. Her savings were dwindling, and Martha had begun to express concern about her future. "You can't stay here forever, honey," Martha said over their weekly spaghetti dinner. "This place will eat your soul if you let it." "I know," Patricia sighed. "I'm trying everything I can think of." "Have you considered reaching out to friends, other family?" Patricia shook her head. "The friends drifted away during Robert's illness, and family." Her voice trailed off as she thought of Rachel's continued silence. 10 days after sending the letter, Patricia's phone rang with an unknown Dallas number. Her heart raced as she answered. "Mrs. Brown," a male voice inquired. "This is Leonard Goldstein." "I received your letter." Patricia's breath caught. "Yes, Mr. Goldstein. Thank you for calling. I must say, your letter was unexpected. Eleanor Morgan's daughter, after all these years." His voice had the slight quaver of advanced age, but his mind seemed sharp. "You knew my mother." "Yes, I knew Eleanor, and I've been waiting for this call, though I'd nearly given up hope of receiving it." They arranged to meet the following week in Dallas. Patricia spent every spare dollar on a bus ticket, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. What would she learn? Would it change anything? Everything Goldstein and Associates occupied a modest office in a historic building in downtown Dallas. The reception area spoke of old money and discretion, dark wood paneling, leather chairs, and not a computer in sight. Patricia gave her name to the elderly receptionist, who nodded as if she'd been expected. Leonard Goldstein was in his 80s, with sparse white hair and wire-rimmed glasses, but his handshake was firm and his blue eyes alert. He led Patricia to his private office and closed the door behind them. "Please, sit." He gestured to a leather chair across from his massive desk. Patricia perched nervously on the edge. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Goldstein." He studied her face intently. "You look like her Eleanor, around the eyes especially. You knew her well." "Well enough." He opened a drawer and removed a large envelope, yellowed with age. "I've kept this for a very long time, wondering if you would ever come looking." "What is it, the truth, Mrs. Brown, or part of it, at least?" He slid the envelope across the desk. "This is from Harold James Sterling. He asked that it be given to you if you ever came asking questions." With trembling fingers, Patricia opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten on sterling energy letterhead, dated just months before her birth. "To my daughter, Margaret Louise." It began. Patricia's breath hitched. Margaret Louise, her full name, rarely used. The letter continued, detailing a love affair between Harold Sterling and Eleanor Morgan that had spanned years. He expressed regret for his inability to claim Patricia publicly, explained the social and business pressures that had kept him from acknowledging her, and outlined provisions he had made for her future. "In the event of my death," the letter read, "I have insured a portion of my personal assets, untraceable through my estate, are to be delivered to you via Mr. Goldstein. You are my blood, and though I was too much a coward to claim you in life, I claim you now in death." Patricia looked up, tears blurring her vision. "He's dead." Goldstein nodded. 15 years ago, heart attack on his ranch. And these provisions he mentions, Goldstein placed a folder on the desk. A trust, established in your name but held in escrow until you came forward. Sterling was careful his wife and legitimate children never knew. The funds were placed in offshore accounts, then filtered through a series of shell companies before being invested. Patricia opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, all in the name of a trust with her initials MLM Trust. "How much?" she whispered. "Just over $1.3 million. Goldstein replied calmly. "The original sum was smaller, but wise investments over the decades have increased its value considerably. Patricia felt dizzy. The amount was beyond comprehension, especially after counting pennies for a motel room. Why didn't my mother tell me? Why keep this secret all these years? Goldstein removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. Eleanor made a promise to Harold that she would never reveal your paternity unless absolutely necessary. I believe she intended to tell you eventually, but she passed away before finding the right moment. And the man who raised me, James Morgan, did he know? He suspected, I believe. It caused considerable strain in their marriage. Patricia remembered the fights, the drinking, the cold silences between her parents. It all made sense now, the puzzle pieces of her childhood clicking into place. What happens now? She asked finally. Now, Mrs. Brown, the trust becomes yours to manage as you see fit. I've prepared the necessary paperwork. He slid another folder across the desk. Sign these and you'll have access to everything. Patricia didn't move to take the papers. This feels unreal. I imagine it does. Goldstein's expression softened. Take some time. The money isn't going anywhere. But Patricia knew she didn't need time. After months of uncertainty, of feeling powerless and abandoned, here was something solid, a foundation she could build upon. She took the pen he offered and signed her name on each marked line, not just for the money, but for the acknowledgement, the connection to a truth long buried. Thank you, she said as she finished the last signature. Not just for this, but for keeping your word to him, for waiting all these years. Goldstein nodded. Harold Sterling wasn't perfect, few men are, but in this, at least, he tried to do right by you. Patricia left the office clutching the folders to her chest, stepping into the Dallas sunshine, a different woman than when she'd entered, not just financially, but fundamentally. The ground beneath her feet felt solid for the first time since Robert's death. She didn't return to Austin that day. Instead, she checked into a proper hotel, ordered room service, and spread the documents across the king-sized bed, reading each page carefully. By morning, she had the beginnings of a plan. Patricia remained in Dallas for the next 2 weeks, working closely with Goldstein to understand her new financial position. He introduced her to investment advisors, real estate specialists, and a discreet accountant who could help her navigate her sudden wealth. The key, Goldstein advised, is patience. Don't make any rash decisions. But Patricia had spent months being patient, months feeling powerless. Now, she wanted action. She rented a short-term apartment in downtown Austin, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman, the kind of place Matthew would approve of. She bought new clothes, had her hair styled in a sophisticated bob that took years off her appearance, and began studying. Every morning, she woke at 6, made coffee, and sat at her new desk researching real estate markets, investment strategies, and business operations. YouTube became her university, teaching her the language of finance that Matthew had always used to intimidate her. Compound interest, she murmured to herself as she worked through calculations. Leverage, liquid assets. By day, she met with financial advisors and real estate agents. By night, she pored over property listings and legal documents. The transformation wasn't just external. Patricia felt her mind sharpening, her confidence growing with each decision she made. She only tried calling Rachel once during this period, on her daughter's birthday. The call went to voicemail, as expected. Patricia left a simple message. Happy birthday, sweetheart. I love you. No mention of where she was or what had changed. That revelation would come later. 6 weeks into her new life, Patricia's real estate agent, Diane, called with news that made her pulse quicken. There's a property coming up for auction next week, Diane said. A small apartment complex in East Austin. The owner defaulted on property taxes and commercial loans. How many units? Patricia asked, already opening her laptop. 12 units, 3 stories, decent condition but needs updates. The location is excellent. Property values in that area have increased 15% in the last year alone. Send me the details, Patricia said, a strange feeling of anticipation building in her chest. When the information arrived, Patricia's hands trembled as she scrolled through the listing. Bluestone Apartments, 1435 Eastland Drive. She knew that address. She'd lived at that address. It was Rachel and Matthew's building. Patricia sat back, momentarily stunned by the coincidence. Or was it fate? She zoomed in on the photos, recognizing the modest courtyard where she'd first arrived with her suitcases, the hallways she'd walked countless times, the exterior of the apartment where she'd been told she was an extra mouth to feed. Her first instinct was to close the laptop, to walk away from this strange convergence. It felt too personal, too fraught with emotion. But then a different feeling emerged, not vengeance exactly, but a sense of poetic justice, a chance to reclaim something that had been taken from her dignity. Patricia called Goldstein immediately. "I need to set up an LLC," she said without preamble. "Something anonymous that can't be traced back to me personally. May I ask why?" His voice carried a note of concern. "I'm considering a real estate investment, and I prefer to maintain privacy." There was a pause. "Is this about your daughter, Mrs. Brown?" Patricia hadn't told him about Rachel and Matthew, about being forced out of their home, but Goldstein was perceptive. "Not entirely," she answered carefully. "But yes, there's a personal element." "I see," he said, his tone neutral. "I can arrange the LLC. What name would you prefer?" Patricia thought for a moment. "ML Holdings," she said finally. "For Margaret Louise." The auction was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Patricia prepared meticulously, reviewing comparable properties, calculating maximum bids, arranging financing through her trust. She didn't allow herself to think too deeply about what she was doing about the fact that she was about to become the landlord to her own daughter and the man who had cast her out. The morning of the auction, Patricia dressed carefully in a charcoal gray pantsuit, her hair smoothed into a sleek style, minimal jewelry except for her wedding ring, which she wore as a talisman of Robert's strength. She looked nothing like the broken woman who had walked out of Bluestone Apartments months ago. The auction was held in a conference room at the county courthouse, attended by a small group of investors and real estate professionals. Patricia sat near the back, a manila folder of documents in her lap, her expression carefully neutral. The auctioneer, a balding man with a rapid-fire delivery, described the property, listed its tax value, and opened the bidding. Patricia waited, watching as the price climbed $450,000, $500,000, or $525,000. When it reached $550,000, she raised her paddle for the first time. $575,000, she announced clearly. A man in the front row countered $600,000. Patricia responded immediately, $650,000. The room quieted. The man turned to look at her, assessing this new competitor. Patricia met his gaze steadily, her expression revealing nothing. $675,000, he said finally. $750,000, Patricia countered without hesitation. There was a murmur in the room. The price had jumped significantly. "The bid is $750,000, the auctioneer confirmed. "Do I hear $775,000? The man in front consulted with a colleague, then shook his head. "Going once at $750,000, going twice. Sold to bidder number 17. A small thrill ran through Patricia as she signed the necessary paperwork. The representative from ML Holdings. The auction document stated, not Patricia Brown, not the discarded mother-in-law, the owner. As she left the courthouse, Patricia felt neither triumph nor guilt, but a strange sense of calm. This wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration, about reclaiming her place in a world that had tried to erase her. "What next?" Diane asked as they walked to the car. "Next," Patricia said, "we make some changes." The transfer of ownership was completed within the month. Patricia worked with property management professionals to handle the transition, keeping herself removed from day-to-day operations. No one at Bluestone Apartments knew that ML Holdings was a shell company owned by a former resident. Her first official act as owner was to order a comprehensive inspection of all units and common areas. The report confirmed what she already suspected: years of minimal maintenance had left the building with significant issues: outdated plumbing, inefficient heating and cooling, security concerns. "I want everything brought up to code," she told the property manager, a competent woman named Veronica. "No cutting corners." "That will require substantial investment," Veronica warned. And it might necessitate rent increases to cover costs. I understand, Patricia replied. Draw up a proposal for gradual improvements and corresponding rent adjustments. Make them fair, but competitive for the neighborhood. When the proposal arrived a week later, Patricia reviewed it carefully. The suggested rent increases ranged from 15% to 25%, depending on unit size and current rates. But when she came to Unit 2B, Rachel and Matthew's apartment, Patricia made a single change. Triple it, she wrote in the margin. Veronica called immediately. Mrs. Brown, there may be a misunderstanding. A 200% increase for this unit is significantly out of line with the others. It's not a mistake, Patricia said calmly. Unit 2B will be charged triple the current rate. May I ask why the tenants have been reliable, always paying on time? Let's just say I have my reasons, Patricia replied. Please proceed as directed. The notification letters were sent out the following week. All tenants were informed of upcoming improvements, revised lease terms, and new rental rates effective in 30 days. For most, the increases were substantial, but not shocking. For Unit 2B, the number would be staggering. Patricia didn't need to be present to imagine Matthew's reaction, the disbelief, the outrage, the indignation. She pictured him pacing their living room, ranting about corporate greed and unfair practices, perhaps even threatening legal action, and Rachel, caught in the crossfire again, worried about finances but unwilling to challenge her husband's authority. The thought brought no joy, only a hollow vindication. This wasn't happiness, it was justice. And justice, Patricia was learning, tasted different than she'd expected. 3 days after the notices went out, Patricia's phone rang. The caller ID made her heart skip Rachel. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail, maintaining the distance that had calcified between them. But something, perhaps hope, perhaps simple curiosity, made her answer. Hello. Mom, Rachel's voice sounded strained, uncertain. Is that you? Yes, Rachel, it's me. There was a pause, filled with months of unspoken words. Then, I don't know if you've heard, but something weird is happening. Our rent it tripled overnight. The whole building has new owners, and they're singling us out. Matt's losing his mind. I don't know what to do. Patricia closed her eyes, absorbing the irony of her daughter turning to her for help with a problem she herself had created. That sounds difficult, she said carefully. It's impossible. We can't afford it. But Matt refuses to move. Says it's the principle of the thing. He thinks someone's targeting him specifically. If only she knew how right he was. What do you think? Patricia asked. I think, Rachel's voice cracked. I think I miss you. Mom, I've missed you every day since you left. Since she left, not since Rachel had stood by while her husband forced her mother out. The subtle rewriting of history wasn't lost on Patricia. I've missed you too, Patricia admitted, because it was true, despite everything. Can we talk in person, please? Patricia hesitated. She wasn't ready to reveal everything. Not yet. The timing wasn't right. Not right now, Rachel. I need more time. Time for what? There was a note of desperation in her voice. Time to heal, Patricia said simply. But I'm glad you called. I'm glad to know you're okay. Am I okay? Rachel sounded genuinely confused. Nothing feels okay anymore. Sometimes things have to fall apart before they can be rebuilt properly, Patricia said, surprised by her own words. Take care of yourself, Rachel, and call again if you need to. She ended the call, set down the phone, and stared out the window at the Austin skyline. The first piece had moved on the board. Now she would wait and see how the game unfolded. 2 weeks after Rachel's phone call, Patricia stood by the window of her downtown apartment, watching rain streak the glass. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman transformed not just by expensive clothes and a stylish haircut, but by a newfound resolve that straightened her spine and lifted her chin. The property management company had kept her updated on Bluestone Apartments. The renovations were underway, security cameras installed, plumbing upgraded, fresh paint in the hallways. Most tenants had accepted the rent increases. grumbling but acknowledging the improvements justified the cost. Only one tenant had filed multiple complaints, demanding to speak with the owner directly, Matthew Miller, Unit 2B. His emails to the management office grew increasingly hostile. He threatened legal action, claimed discrimination, demanded to know who was behind ML Holdings. Patricia read each message with detached interest, noting how his language grew more desperate, more unhinged with each passing day. Rachel hadn't called again. Patricia wondered if Matthew had forbidden it, or if her daughter was simply overwhelmed by their financial situation. According to Veronica, Unit 2B's rent remained unpaid for the current month, the first time they had ever been late. The intercom buzzed, startling Patricia from her thoughts. "Ms. Brown?" The doorman's voice crackled through the speaker. "There's a young woman here to see you. She says she's your daughter." Patricia's heart stuttered. "Send her up, please." She moved away from the window, smoothing her slacks and tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. How had Rachel found her? What did she want? The questions swirled as Patricia waited for the knock that would bring her face to face with the daughter who had chosen silence over defense. When it came, Patricia took a steadying breath before opening the door. Rachel stood in the hallway, her appearance shocking in its deterioration. Her clothes hung loosely on her frame, her face pale and drawn, dark circles beneath her eyes. She clutched her purse to her chest like a shield. "Mom," she whispered, her voice catching. Patricia stepped back, allowing her daughter to enter. Rachel moved hesitantly, her eyes darting around the apartment, taking in the sleek furniture, the expensive art, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "How did you find me?" Patricia asked, closing the door. "I hired a private investigator," Rachel admitted. "Used my savings. Matt doesn't know." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a step. I had to see you." Rachel's voice trembled. They're bad. Mom." "Sit down." Patricia gestured to the sofa. "Would you like some tea?" Rachel nodded, perching on the edge of the couch as if afraid to settle in. Patricia moved to the kitchen, filling the kettle with practiced calm despite her racing heart. As she prepared 2 mugs, she watched Rachel from the corner of her eye how her daughter's gaze traveled over the apartment, confusion evident in her furrowed brow. "This place is beautiful," Rachel said when Patricia returned with the tea. "How did you—" Patricia handed her a mug. "Things have changed for me." Clearly, Rachel wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic. I was worried you'd still be at that motel." "Or worse." "You needn't have worried," Patricia said, her tone cooler than intended. "I'm quite capable of taking care of myself." Rachel flinched. "I deserve that." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between them. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the windows. "Matt's not who I thought he was," Rachel said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Patricia said nothing, waiting. I knew he could be difficult, controlling, but I told myself it was stress, that he'd get better once we were more financially stable." She looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. "But it's getting worse. The rent increase pushed him over the edge. He's obsessed with finding out who's behind it, convinced someone's targeting us specifically." Patricia kept her expression neutral. "That seems unlikely." "That's what I said. But he won't listen. He's been going through my phone, my emails. Last week, he followed me to work. Said he wanted to make sure I wasn't involved in some conspiracy against him." Rachel shuddered. "He asked if I was hiding something. If you were hiding something." Patricia's breath caught. "What did you tell him?" "I lied. Said I hadn't spoken to you in weeks. That I didn't even know where you were." Rachel looked up. "But that was before I found out about your building." The last words hung in the air between them. Patricia went very still. "My building." Rachel nodded slowly. "I saw the security notice in our lobby. ML Holdings appreciates your patience during these upgrades. The same company name was on our rent increase notice, ML Margaret Louise." She paused. "It wasn't hard to connect the dots once I started looking." Patricia set down her mug carefully. She'd been discovered sooner than anticipated, but perhaps it was for the best. I see. Is it true? Rachel asked, leaning forward. Did you buy our building? Patricia held her daughter's gaze steadily. Yes. Rachel's eyes widened. But how? Where did you get that kind of money? That's a long story. I've got time, Rachel said, a hint of her old stubbornness emerging. Patricia considered deflecting, maintaining the mystery a while longer, but looking at her daughter's exhausted face, she recognized that the time for games had passed. Taking a deep breath, she told Rachel everything about finding Eleanor's diary, the meeting with Goldstein, Harold Sterling's letter, the trust fund that had changed everything. Rachel listened in stunned silence, her tea growing cold in her hands. When Patricia finished, she shook her head in disbelief. All this time, you never knew Grandpa James wasn't really your father. No, I had no idea until I found the diary. And my grandfather was a millionaire oil tycoon. Rachel's voice held a note of wonder. Biologically, yes, though he never claimed me publicly. And now you own our building and tripled our rent. Rachel's tone shifted, the awe fading to hurt. Why? Mom, to punish us. Patricia stood, moving to the window to watch the rain. Not to punish, to teach. Teach what? She turned to face her daughter. That actions have consequences, that people aren't disposable, that you don't discard someone who loves you simply because they've become inconvenient. Rachel flinched as if struck. I never thought of you as disposable. Didn't you? Patricia's voice was soft but pointed. You stood by while Matthew called me an extra mouth to feed. You said nothing when he suggested I find something more stable, as if I were a stray dog needing a kennel. And when I walked out that door with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go, you didn't follow. You didn't call. For months. Rachel, months? Tears slid down Rachel's cheeks. I was afraid, she whispered. Matt, he has ways of making me feel like I have no choice, like his way is the only way. We always have choices, Patricia said, though her voice softened at her daughter's distress. Every day, every moment, we choose who we want to be. Rachel wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I've been trying to call you. Matt checks my phone records, so I had to use a friend's phone. When you finally answered, I was so relieved. But then you said you weren't ready to see me. And I didn't know what to do. So you hired a private investigator. A flicker of defiance crossed Rachel's face. I needed to find you, to tell you I'm sorry. For everything. Patricia studied her daughter, searching for sincerity in her tear-streaked face. And Matt, does he know you're here? Rachel shook her head. He thinks I'm at work. If he knew... What would he do? Patricia asked sharply. Rachel, are you safe with him? A loaded silence followed the question. Rachel stared down at her hands. Physically, yes, he's never hit me. But emotionally, I don't know anymore. He makes me feel so small, so dependent, like I can't trust my own thoughts. Patricia recognized the signs, the isolation, the control, the erosion of confidence. She'd seen it in friends' marriages, had even counseled women at her church to leave such relationships. But seeing it in her own daughter was a different kind of pain. You can leave him, she said gently. Rachel's laugh was hollow. And go where we can barely afford our apartment now with the rent increase. I'd need to save. To plan. You can stay here, Patricia offered before she could reconsider. I have plenty of room. Rachel looked up, surprise evident in her reddened eyes. You'd do that after everything. Patricia moved to sit beside her daughter, taking Rachel's cold hands in her own. You're my child. Nothing changes that, not Matthew's cruelty, not your silence, not even my hurt. I will always have a place for you. Rachel broke then, her composure crumbling as sobs racked her body. Patricia pulled her close, cradling her daughter's head against her shoulder as she had when Rachel was small. They stayed that way for a long time, the rain providing a steady soundtrack to their reunion. When Rachel's tears subsided, she sat back, wiping her face. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Probably not, Patricia agreed with a small smile. But you have it anyway. The question is, what will you do with it? Rachel took a shaky breath. I don't know. I need to think. About Matt. About us. About everything. Take all the time you need, Patricia said. My door is always open to you. As Rachel prepared to leave, she paused by the door. The rent increase. Was it really just to teach us a lesson? Patricia considered the question. Not entirely. It was also to show myself that I could, that I wasn't powerless anymore. Rachel nodded slowly. I understand. More than you might think. She reached for the doorknob, then turned back. Matt's determined to find out who owns the building. He won't stop until he does. I'm counting on it, Patricia replied. After Rachel left, Patricia remained by the window, watching her daughter's small figure emerge from the building below and hurry through the rain to a waiting taxi. Something had shifted between them today, not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but a beginning, a crack in the wall that had divided them. Now, it was time for the final act. Patricia picked up her phone and called Veronica. I'd like to schedule a building meeting, she said, to discuss the renovations with all tenants. I'll be attending personally. The common room of Bluestone Apartments was modestly sized, with mismatched chairs arranged in rows facing a small table at the front. Patricia arrived early, dressed in a professional navy suit, her demeanor calm and collected. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, rehearsed the words she would say, the reactions she might face. Veronica greeted her with a handshake. The tenants have been notified. We're expecting full attendance. They're all curious about the mysterious new owner. Thank you, Patricia nodded. I'll wait in your office until it's time. From the property manager's office, Patricia watched through the blinds as tenants filtered into the common room. She recognized some faces from her time living there, the elderly couple from the first floor, the single mother with twins from across the hall, the college student who played music too loudly on weekends. Then came Rachel, looking pale but composed in a simple dress. Matthew followed, his posture rigid with anger, jaw set in determination. He wore a suit that Patricia recognized the one he reserved for important meetings, when he wanted to intimidate with his appearance. At precisely 7 o'clock, Veronica entered the common room and called for attention. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. As promised, I'd like to introduce the owner of ML Holdings, who has graciously agreed to address your questions and concerns about the ongoing renovations and recent changes. Patricia took a deep breath and stepped into the room. A collective murmur rose from the gathered tenants. Rachel's eyes widened, though she'd clearly suspected this moment might come. Matthew's reaction was more dramatic, his face contorting in disbelief, then anger, his body half rising from his chair before Rachel pulled him back down. Good evening, Patricia said, her voice steady as she took her place beside Veronica. My name is Patricia Brown. I'm the owner of ML Holdings, and as of 2 months ago, the owner of this building. The room fell silent. Matthew stared at her, his expression a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. Some of you may remember me, Patricia continued. I lived here briefly with my daughter and son-in-law before circumstances required me to leave. I've returned now in a different capacity, with a vision for improvements that will benefit all residents. She outlined the renovation plans methodically, the security upgrades, the plumbing fixes, the communal area improvements. She explained the need for rent adjustments to cover these costs, assuring tenants that the increases were in line with market rates for comparable properties. Throughout her presentation, Matthew's glare intensified, his face flushing darker with each passing minute. Rachel sat beside him, her eyes fixed on her lap, her hands clasped tightly together. Are there any questions? Patricia asked as she concluded. Several hands went up. Patricia addressed each concern patiently. Yes, the laundry facilities would be upgraded. No, parking fees wouldn't increase this year. Yes, the buzzer system would be fixed by next month. When she called on Matthew, his voice was tight with barely contained rage. Is this some kind of joke? I'm not sure what you mean. Mr. Miller, Patricia replied evenly. You know exactly what I mean. He stood, ignoring Rachel's attempt to pull him back. You buy this building out of nowhere, triple our rent specifically, then show up playing landlord. This is harassment, Patricia met his gaze calmly. The rent increases were determined by market research and the need for improvements. Your unit's adjustment was based on a comprehensive assessment of comparable properties. Bullshit, Matthew spat. This is personal, and everyone in this room knows it. Murmurs rippled through the gathered tenants. Uncomfortable glances exchanged. Matt, please, Rachel whispered, tugging at his sleeve. Not here. He shook her off. No, Rachel, I want answers. I want to know how your mother suddenly has the money to buy an entire apartment complex. I want to know why she's targeting us. I'm not targeting anyone, Patricia replied, her composure unshaken. I'm running a business. The same business, incidentally, that you're a customer of. If you're unhappy with the terms, you're welcome to find housing elsewhere. Matthew's face contorted. You think you've won, don't you? You think this makes up for what happened? This isn't about winning, Patricia said, her voice softening slightly. It's about consequences, about understanding that the way we treat people matters. Don't lecture me about Matt, stop. Rachel's voice cut through his tirade, stronger than Patricia had heard in years. She stood up beside him, shoulders squared. She's right. Matthew turned to her, incredulous. Are you kidding me right now? No, Rachel said, meeting his gaze steadily. I'm not. She's right about consequences, about how we treat people. She took a deep breath. About how you treated her. The room had gone completely still, the other tenants watching with uncomfortable fascination as the drama unfolded. I think, Veronica interjected smoothly, we should conclude the general meeting. If individual tenants have specific concerns, they can schedule appointments through the office. The tenants began to disperse, some lingering to speak with Veronica, others hurrying away from the tension. Soon, only Patricia, Rachel, and Matthew remained, locked in a triangle of unresolved emotions. Matthew looked between them, his expression darkening as understanding dawned. You two have been talking. Behind my back. She's my mother. Matt, Rachel said quietly. And I'm your husband. His voice was dangerous, low. Or have you forgotten that? Rachel flinched but held her ground. How could I forget? You remind me every time I try to make a decision for myself. Matthew turned to Patricia, his facade cracking completely. This isn't over. You think you can buy your way into power play these games? I'll find a way to fight this. You'll what? Patricia interrupted, her voice cool. Sue me on what grounds, expose me. For what crime? I've done nothing illegal, nothing unethical. I simply purchased a property and set fair market rates. Fair, he sputtered. Triple our rent. That's fair. About as fair as kicking out your mother-in-law with nowhere to go, Rachel said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. About as fair as calling her an extra mouth to feed when she was grieving her husband. Matthew stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. You're choosing her, he said flatly. After everything I've done for you, I'm choosing myself, Rachel corrected him. For the first time in years, he shook his head, backing away. You'll regret this. Both of you. With a final glare, he stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Rachel exhaled shakily, looking to Patricia with tears in her eyes. I don't know if I did the right thing. Patricia moved to her daughter's side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Standing up for yourself is always the right thing, even when it's terrifying. What happens now? Rachel asked, her voice small. Now, Patricia said, guiding her toward the door. We go home, we talk. We begin again, as they left Bluestone Apartments together. Patricia felt neither triumph nor vindication, only a quiet certainty that whatever came next, whatever Matthew's reaction, whatever challenges awaited, she would face them not as a victim, but as a woman who had reclaimed her power, her dignity, and perhaps her daughter. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and glistening under streetlights. A new beginning, written in water.